Most of us have been victim to prejudice or discrimination in one form or another at some point in our lives. Some of us may have even been victim to it more times than others. And a lot of us have even victimized others by using prejudice or discrimination, whether intentional or unintentional, not knowing the effect this discrimination may have on a person's life or well-being. Prejudice and discrimination are a prevalent reoccurrence in modern society that many people are unaware of. And in today's world, many people discriminate based on an opinion of prejudice, not knowing that they're even being prejudiced to begin with, nor knowing the effects that this discrimination may cause. So first, let us define what prejudice, discrimination, and hate crimes, the most violent form of discrimination, actually are. As defined by dictionary.com, prejudice is an unfavorable opinion or feeling formed beforehand or without knowledge, thought, or reason. As defined by google.com, discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex. And as defined by Merriam-Webster, hate crimes are any of various crimes as assault or defacement of property when motivated by hostility to the victim as a member of a group, as one based on color, creed, gender, or sexual orientation. Now what this means is that prejudice, discrimination, and hate crimes are all different levels of action based upon someone being different. Prejudice is the development of thoughts or feelings based on someone being different without actually knowing them. And discrimination is the action of treating someone unfairly based on them being different. And then hate crimes is the action of causing physical damage to a person or their property because they are different. So what are the effects of this prejudice, discrimination, and hate crimes? What effects do they have? Well, first, prejudice. Obviously, once prejudice develops into more than a thought and actually becomes the action of discrimination and hate crimes, then the impact is much larger. But prejudice by itself impacts both the victim and the victimizer by potentially preventing the development of mutually beneficial relationships. Now, once prejudice evolves into an action of discrimination, then the impact is much larger. And according to social psychologist Anita Rattan, victims of discrimination experience higher levels of chronic stress, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and suicide. As well, Rattan also states victims of discrimination can experience a lower sense of well-being and self-control, as well as lower IQ test performance. Now, once discrimination evolves into the most violent form known as hate crimes, then the impact is devastating and disastrous. Hate crimes oftentimes leave the victims emotionally and physically destroyed, as you see here, often even leaving victims tortured and or killed. An example of someone that uses hate crimes often is the well-known terrorist group known as ISIS. ISIS is a terrorist group of Muslims that forces their religious beliefs on people of other religions. When people do not conform to their religious beliefs, they often kill them, most commonly by beheading them. Even though ISIS is sometimes shown on American news, more times than not, the news uses media isolation to isolate us from the events that are going on. So let's talk about this media isolation, how it's a form of prejudice that brings about further prejudice, and how often hate crimes actually do occur, as well as the different forms of prejudice, discrimination, and hate crimes. Media isolation is a form of prejudice that kind of picks and chooses what kind of discrimination and hate crimes to show. It tunes out sort of the most violent forms of discrimination, as you see here in third world countries throughout the world, or countries that are just not as well off as us here in America. And instead shows you the less significant forms of discrimination, as you see here what happened in Paris. Now this was still a very violent act, but in comparison was nowhere near as violent as what is happening in the third world countries. This media isolation brings about further prejudice by giving Americans a sense of, well, since it's not happening here, it's not happening in my backyard, I'm safe, and I'm too good for these hate crimes, it can't happen to me. But in actuality, these hate crimes are happening every day right here in America. So let's talk about the actual occurrences that they do take place. The following statistics are all from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's website. As of 2012, there were 5,796 hate crimes reported with 6,718 offenses, which included 10 murders and 15 forcible rapes. 5,790 of these hate crimes reported in 2012 were suspected to be of a single bias motivation. Also, 194 of these hate crimes were committed right here in Kentucky. In 2013, there were 5,928 hate crimes reported with 6,933 offenses, which included 5 murders and 21 rapes. 5,922 of these hate crimes were suspected to be motivated by a single bias. Also, 171 of the hate crimes reported in 2013 happened right here in Kentucky. For 2014, there were 5,479 hate crimes reported with 6,418 offenses, which included 4 murders and 9 rapes. 5,462 of these hate crimes were suspected to be motivated by a single bias, and 163 of the hate crimes reported last year were committed right here in Kentucky. For a total, that means that in the last 3 years, there has been 17,203 hate crimes reported with 20,069 offenses in the United States. That includes 19 murders and 45 rapes. 17,174 of these hate crimes were suspected to be of a single bias, and 528 of these hate crimes were committed right here in Kentucky. Now, this doesn't account for the hate crimes that went unreported, as well as the suicides that were a result of discrimination. Also, it doesn't account for the violent acts of discrimination that were not considered significant enough to be labeled as a hate crime. Prejudice, discrimination, and hate crimes can be based on several different things. As you can see here, some are race, sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity or natural origin, gender identity, disability, and gender, as well as body size, just to name a few. Society has set forth guidelines for what is normal and taught us to be prejudiced against anything that goes against these normal guidelines. But if we were to dislike any person that was different from us, then we would not like anyone, and the world would be a very lonely and unhappy place. One simple word, prejudice, can be used to describe so many complex, predestined hatreds within our society. So the next time you consider judging a book by its cover, just remember the damage it may cause. And also understand that under different circumstances, it could be you in their position, possibly wishing that you were never even born.